One is on the board with COVA, and so we're both honored to be here today, and we're grateful for the invitation. So thank you so much, Kirsten.
Great. We're excited to hear a lot more about what MADD has to offer and what you guys have going on.
Awesome. Well, we will get rolling. I'd like to start with our mission. Our mission is to end drunk driving, help fight drugged driving, support the victims of these violent crimes, and prevent underage drinking. And since our founding in 1980, we've been able to cut drunk driving deaths in half, which means we've saved an estimated 380,000 lives on our roadways all across the country. And in that time, we've provided support services to 850,000 victims and survivors of drunk and drug driving crashes. And unfortunately, that's part of our mission that a lot of people don't know about, which was one of the reasons why we're excited to be here today to talk and join you on this webinar. Through our support services that we provide at no charge to victims and survivors, we've been able to serve almost 900,000 people. So we have some great accomplishments in that time. However, we do know that far too many lives continue to be taken on our roads, and so we're going to keep working until there are no more victims of drunk and drug driving. So one of the things that we do talk about, we always want to talk about crashes, not accidents. There are accidents that happen on our roads, totally unavoidable things that happen every day. So there are accidents. However, drunk and drug driving, they are a choice that someone made. They got impaired, they chose to get behind the wheel, they chose to drive, and so we don't see them as accidental. That situation is totally avoidable. It's 100% preventable. And these are violent crimes. They are crimes that result in gruesome deaths and life-changing injuries. And so we always want to say crash instead of accident because these crimes are 100% preventable 100% of the time. Okay. Sorry, slight issue with our slides. One thing we do want to just start off a little bit about our history with MADD. We were founded in 1980 by a mother whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver. Candy Leitner started MADD after her daughter Carrie was struck and killed by a drunk driver. And we are part of the National MADD organization, which is really helpful to us because we do have victims who might be in Colorado, but a crash occurred in another state, or vice versa. A crash could occur here and the victims are out of state. And if we have an office in that other state, then we're able to provide support in both places. We were founded here in Colorado in 1983 by a daughter. Her name's Barbara Broach. She's our longest serving volunteer. Her mother was killed by a drunk driver. So Barbara had heard about MADD in other states and said, hey, we need to have that here in Colorado, and started her own chapter and has continued to volunteer with us since 1983. Now, here in Colorado last year, 209 lives were taken by drunk and drug driving just here on our roads in Colorado. So we know that these deaths and injuries continue to happen on our roads, and so we want to continue to work towards that future of no more victims. There were 21,747 impaired driving arrests on our roads, and these crashes, in addition to the tragedies that they're causing, they do have a financial impact, which is something we have to talk about with legislators and our policymakers so they hear not only the personal impact, but they hear that these crashes have an impact on our economy of an estimated $1.1 billion. So in addition to that financial impact, of course, we always do want to talk about, these aren't just statistics. There are people with family and friends and loved ones who miss them very much. And so we are constantly reaching out to our legislators to educate them about these issues and to keep drunk and drug driving and preventing these tragedies top of mind.
All right, so now we want to talk a little more about one of the things that MADD does. We have a few different focuses and purposes that we pursue, but one of them is providing services to the victims of these crashes. So if the person is injured in a crash, we provide services to them and or their family and friends. If a person is killed in a crash, then we serve their family, friends, loved ones that are left behind. We provide services at no charge. That's really important to us, that you all know that, and that victims and witnesses and survivors know that they can obtain services from us, no charge at all. So, and we provide services for as long as they're needed. So, and we will get cases sometimes right after the crash happens. Sometimes we don't get a case until, we may have a victim or survivor reach out to us years after the crash happened, and they may need services, referrals, information. So, no matter what point we receive the case, then we will provide services as long as they're needed. So sometimes that can go on for many years. As Fran mentioned, our state founder, Barbara Brote, while she's a volunteer with us, we also are providing services to her still to this day. And we also provide services in English and in Spanish. So, if you have a victim with who speaks primarily or speaks Spanish, that we can provide services to them as well. One of our victim advocates is bilingual. And as Fran had mentioned, we are part of the national organization. So if you have a victim that's in another state that perhaps the crash happened here, we can help get them connected to services in that state that they live in. So some of the cases that we provide services to, sometimes this list surprises people because they think that it has to specifically involve alcohol and a vehicular crash. But our scope is really much wider than that. So we can handle vehicular homicide cases, vehicular assault, DUI or DWAI crashes, hit and run, child endangerment, and underage drinking. So by DUI or DWAI crashes, what we mean by that is it could be a single car crash where we know that the driver, single occupant of the vehicle, had been impaired and crashed their car, and that resulted in death or injury, then we would provide services to the family in that circumstance. A hit and run, we know that a lot of times when a crash occurs, the reason they run from the scene, it's very likely that they were impaired. Even if it was determined later that they weren't impaired, sometimes they can determine that, sometimes they can't, we can still provide services. And then child endangerment, what we mean by that is if we have a driver who is continually driving with a child in the car and we know that they're impaired, even though a crash hasn't occurred yet, if there are concerned family members or neighbors, they can get in touch with us and we can provide them with resources. And then underage drinking. So if we have kids who are in high school and drinking, and then there's an incident that results in their death, we can provide services to the family. But then there's also other alcohol-related incidents. So let's say there's a concert at Red Rocks, somebody is impaired, they decide to climb up the rocks, fall down and die. We could provide that family services. So it doesn't have to specifically be a car crash that results in the death or injury of a person.
That's really interesting. And actually, this is Kirsten. Can I ask a question about the DUI or DWAI crashes? So single car, you mentioned single car crash, driver is impaired in some way and is killed, you will assist that family. What if they're seriously injured and they have their own court case going as a defendant? Would that, or have you had that kind of scenario before?
So we do not in any circumstance intervene on behalf of an offender. So if they're injured and they're being charged with DUI or potentially there was property destruction or they may have injured or killed somebody, we would not intervene on behalf of that person. So we cast a very broad net when it comes to supporting victims and survivors. Our definition is much more expansive than, say, the RA crimes. We don't provide support services to somebody who has caused the death or injury or someone else.
What if their family member was looking for some sort of counseling or resources to help deal with the alcohol problem? Would that potentially be something, or would you kind of refer them to AA and some other resources?
Well, it can depend. You know, we've worked with former spouses,
Okay.
and they have shared kids, so then there's a safety concern for the kids. So we have provided services in those circumstances. So it gets kind of tricky sometimes.
Okay, a little bit case by case basis.
We do, it is very common for us where someone has chosen to drive impaired and they kill themselves. Their family did not make that choice for them. And their family we would consider to be victims and survivors, and we would provide support to them. That's very common for us. I'm actually not familiar with a case in the 10 years that I've been at MADD where we've had somebody injure themselves and then ask us for services. We definitely have had people who said, they were a victim of a crash and it turned out they were the at-fault impaired driver.
Okay.
So I think the bottom line here for everyone listening, if you think it's somebody that we can support, reach out to us and we'll figure it out on our end. You don't have to know all the ins and outs and the nuances. So we want to try and make it simple for everyone trying to connect with us.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten. So, how can we help you? So we're going to talk a little more about what we do on these cases, but before I go into that, I want you to know how we can support you. So we support law enforcement officers and advocates. We support DA's offices, the DA's and victim witness advocates, and other local nonprofits. So first of all, our job is not to get in your way. Our job is not to take over the case. We want to support the efforts that you already have in place and help your work with the victim. We know that advocates, law enforcement advocates, and DA victim witness advocates are notifying victims of their victims' rights, and that you have an obligation to the VRA. We want to help support that work and help support the victim's rights being met. So that's the first thing. So if there's a specific case that you think that we can help you with, reach out to us, let us know, and we can talk to you a little more about how we can help you, through those cases. So that means through the investigation phase, the prosecution phase, and then post-prosecution. So in terms of supporting other local nonprofits, there's a lot of crossover between the work that we're doing and our local nonprofit associates. So, we have folks that have housing issues. And we know that the folks that work in the housing area may have victims who have been, victims of impaired driving crashes. We have, asylum seekers that have been, exposed to this type of crime. So just know that we want to help support you, and, we have a lot of resources that can help each other. So going into a little more about what we specifically can do on cases. So we provide, number one, emotional support. We can also provide peer-to-peer support. So we have other victims that we've been working with, and they are, usually their prosecution on their case has been completed, and they have come back and said, you know what, I want to help. I want to help some other people that have been through something similar to what I have, because nobody knows what you've been through like somebody who's been through what you're going through, So as much as I can be empathetic, I can't say that I've been through that. So we connect peers who have like situations with current victims to provide that peer support. So we provide information. So not only general information about being involved in an impaired driving crash, we can provide information on impaired driving laws, legislation that's currently in process, information on the court process, information on their criminal justice agency, or specifically what's happening in their case. We will look into their case to get them specific court dates, who their best contact person is at the DA's office. So we like to link them with information and their local resources. Also, we help them prepare their victim impact statement for court. So when they're getting ready to testify at the sentencing, we will review their statement to say, oh, hey, you know, we've seen this be really effective in the past, or you may want to mention this or tweak this to make it more impactful. And giving them information about their victims' rights. So if they're calling us with questions and, you know, we may be concerned that something could be happening where their rights may be violated, we might give them more information about what their rights are and who to contact to rectify that situation. So we will also get them connected with their local victim compensation agency, and, you know, maybe get them an application, tell them who to send it to, give them more information about how to access their crime victim rights, or crime victim compensation fund. And then also resource information, literature about, you know, how they can get through their time of grief, how they can help their kids, how can they help their, you know, sometimes we have coworkers that call wanting more information on how to support their friends and loved ones. So we'll also give them local referrals. So if they need counseling, if they need, you know, whatever, there's a whole variety of resources that we can get them connected to, that what they need to do is tell us what they need, and then we can kind of do the research from there. We have a list of therapists that accept crime victim compensation and that work specifically with traumatic grief. And then there's also local support groups that we can get them connected with. So if they need food, shelter, emergency financial assistance, we can get them connected with that as well. And then we also have a list of civil attorneys that specialize in wrongful death and personal injury. And that's something that differs from the system advocates, law enforcement, DA folks, because if you work in the criminal justice system, you can't make referrals to civil attorneys, but we can. And we know who specializes in certain areas, and people that we trust and, you know, that are our supporters. We can go to court with victims. We can also, if it's still in the investigative phase, if they want us to be present for any, you know, investigative process, meeting with detectives, meeting with victim advocates, you know, obviously we wouldn't want to impose on the investigation. So if the victim wanted us there while they were being interviewed, but a detective didn't want us in on the interview, we totally understand that. We would not want to impose on that, but we would just sort of be in the area where whatever the detective said was okay. So, and then going to court hearings, again, we're not there to impose, we are there just to be a support to the victim and to help support the process. So once the case has been adjudicated, or, you know, through the criminal justice process, has reached the sentencing phase, and then we're getting around to where there may be parole hearings, a lot of victims will reach out to us to attend those parole hearings with them, especially if it's a case that we worked with them during the prosecution. So, you know, a lot of times the parole hearing comes up and victims are finding that they're being re-victimized. So we can attend those hearings with them. And then any other community corrections hearing we can attend as well. So we have a variety of memorial opportunities throughout the year. One is we have 2 candlelight vigils in Colorado. One is in Denver, or Denver metro area. One is in Colorado Springs, and that happens every year. We also have in our office, in the Colorado MADD office, we have a remembrance wall where we have all the names of the victims that we served up on our wall, and that just helps us to remember every day, you know, why we're doing this work. At our Walk Like MADD, we have 3 of those every year. I'm going to talk a little more about that at the end of this presentation. But at every walk, we have a memory mile. We have victims that are honored on a sign. It talks about the victim, has their picture, and then they're, you know, a little more about them. So we don't forget who they were in their life, or who they were before their crash, or, you know, it could be if the victim survives the crash, a little about what they've overcome in their life since the crash. So that's a really, really meaningful part of the walk that we do with, like I said, all 3 of the walks. We also have volunteer opportunities. We have victims who have been, you know, through the entire prosecution, or, you know, whatever stage that they come to us. sometimes we have victims that come to us years later and say, this happened to me years ago, I didn't get services at the time, but I want to use this opportunity to help other people. So they can help us at our walks, they can provide peer support, they can talk at our victim impact panels. So there's a variety of volunteer opportunities that we have that if victims come back and say, I really want to use this opportunity, I want to help other people, I want to help stop impaired driving, then we can get them connected with those opportunities. We also have legislative action opportunities. So if we have some legislation, it's really impactful for legislators to hear some victims who have been impacted by this particular incident. So we will reach out and say, we know that this case is very closely related to whatever legislation we're trying to get passed. You know, we'll reach out and say, will you be willing to come and testify in front of the legislature? Because that is the most impactful way to impact these legislators. And our victim impact panels. So anytime somebody is charged with a alcohol-related, like DUI, or a lot of times minor in possession case, they will be mandated to attend a victim impact panel. So our victims have the opportunity, through a long process, we make sure that they're ready for it and they're well prepared to speak at these victim impact panels, speak to people who have been charged with an alcohol-related crime, and hopefully help change that behavior and bring meaning to these types of incidents.
Do you ever, can I ask a question about that? Do you ever hear back from any of the folks who had the alcohol infraction who were ordered to attend the panel? Do you ever get feedback from them about whether, you know, whether that really changed their behavior and their thoughts moving forward, or? Yeah,
and Frank's going to talk a little more about the specifics of the panels, but it's amazing. We'll have lines of people at the end of the panel waiting to talk to the speaker to say, thank you so much, you've impacted my life. I'm going to think of you and make better choices. And we have people that have made donations to MADD after attending the panel. So yeah, it's a really impactful process for everybody involved. So, I mean, the victims have this opportunity to share their story, to say, this is how impaired driving has affected my life. And then those folks attending, you know, have the opportunity to hopefully turn things around. So yeah, Brian's going to go into more detail about that.
Awesome, thanks.
So, and something that I forgot to mention, we can provide services, as I said earlier. If we have a victim that lives out of state, we can get them connected to the MADD in their local office. If there is a victim that has a crash that happened in another state but they live here, then we can provide services to those victims. So keep that in mind. So how do you get connected with us? We have a national helpline, 24/7, and it's on your screen, 877-MADD-HELP. You can also get connected through our website. So there's the national MADD website and then our local MADD website. You can call us. Our phone number is listed. You can email each one of us. So as we said, Fran Lanzer is our executive director. I am the manager of victim services. Amanda Prince is one of our victim services specialists, and Juliet Tunks is one of our other victim services specialists. We give a quick plug to say that we are hiring right now for a victim service specialist to cover northern Colorado. So if you're interested, look at the COVA website or our website for that information.
I think we just lost 2 people because they jumped offline to go start their application.
Right?
No.
Yes. So anyhow, so that's how you get connected with us. So, so yeah, now we're going to talk a little more about our fight against impaired driving and the other services that we provide.
Yeah, so Jocelyn has done a very thorough job of covering our victim services mission prong. So I wanted to talk about just a couple of the other things that we do. We are obviously working to fight drunk and drug driving. A good piece of that is our legislative advocacy. And you can see a picture of us with our volunteers and some legislators down at the Capitol. That's actually the day that felony DUI for repeat offenders was passed, which was a bill that we worked on with COVA and with the Colorado District Attorney's Council to get passed. And so we are looking Of course, at public safety bills, we do a lot working with COVA to try and protect victim rights as well. We do work to support our state and local law enforcement in their efforts to keep our roads safe through DUI enforcement. We do know that in addition to taking impaired drivers off of our roads, high visibility enforcement also has a deterrent effect. So people know that law enforcement is out there, they will actually make better choices and will plan ahead so that they're not putting themselves in a position to drive drunk or high. And so we're working very hard to support those enforcement efforts because we know they save lives. We have been very active in Colorado with our Ignition Interlock program. Colorado was one of the first states to pass the Ignition Interlock law across the country. So at this point, 33 states have passed and signed into law Ignition Interlock legislation. And so Ignition Interlocks, it's a in-car breathalyzer that hooks up to the ignition of a car. And so someone who's gotten a DUI will have one of these devices in their car. So they have to prove that they're sober before they can start their car. And having that device in their car constantly changes behavior. For a first-time offender, it would be up to 8 months. For a repeat offender, or even a first-time offender with a really high BAC, it's a minimum of 2 years. And again, that is constant reinforcement to change their behavior. Ignition interlocks reduce repeat offenses by 2/3. So they are one of the most effective countermeasures to prevent repeat offenses. And also, I would say it is also just more convenient for people. Now, we know that 80% of people will continue to drive under a suspended license. So an ignition interlock is a way that someone who's gotten a DUI can, 1, learn to separate drinking and driving, 2, continue to go to work, support their family. So it really, there are multiple advantages to the ignition interlock program. We are also working with car manufacturers to create advanced technology that would seamlessly integrate into a vehicle to prevent drunk driving. The ignition interlock, it is designed for somebody who has committed a crime. So it's not the most user-friendly device. It's meant to be invasive to prevent repeat offenses. So with advanced technology, that would be something that'd be in your car. You wouldn't even know it's there unless, of course, you had been drinking and were above 0.08, and then your car would not start. So it would be like an airbag. It's there. You don't know it's there unless you need it. And so we want to make that kind of seamless, consumer-based technology as a feature that could be built into automobiles. And so right now we're actually working with the U.S. Department of Transportation. We have 1,500 test vehicles that are out in the roads in Arizona and Massachusetts, and we're looking to try and expand that further for more testing. Bottom line, we have cars that can drive themselves, right? So we should have a car that prevents drunk driving. And then lastly, we do work to recognize the heroes that are out there keeping our communities safe. We actually just had our 2 law enforcement awards events. We had a luncheon in Grand Junction in the early part of May, and then towards the end of May, we had a dinner in Westminster to recognize our law enforcement heroes on the Front Range. And we, of course, are recognizing state and local law enforcement that are out there doing DUI enforcement. We also recognize outstanding prosecutors, outstanding victim advocates, and traffic safety advocates. Everyone who's working to make our roads and our communities safer. And for us, the bottom line is we just want to say thank you. We know that a lot of times this work can be thankless, so we want to make sure that we're saying thank you and supporting the good work that's being done to make our communities safer. We also do a lot of work to prevent underage drinking. So research does show that kids who begin drinking underage are 7 times more likely to be involved in an alcohol-related crash later in life. So we are reaching out to schools to speak with high school students, we're starting to expand into colleges as well, and to get that message out there and to really to empower students to make healthy choices for themselves. We want to give them the information on how their brains develop and how alcohol and other drugs like marijuana can affect that brain development. And also to let them know that despite what they might see on TV or in movies, not everybody in high school drinks, not everybody in high school is using drugs. Research actually shows that most kids do not. So we want to be able to get that information to them and empower them to make healthy choices. We have also recently, there's been a lot of research showing that even when kids are making healthy choices for themselves, they are very likely to get into a car with an impaired driver. Actually, 3 out of 4 high school students would ride with an impaired driver. So we've been working to get that message out there. Not only do you need to make healthy choices for yourself, but never ride with someone who's been drinking or using drugs. We do have a prong under underage drinking where we reach out to parents to give them tips and tools on how they can engage their kids about alcohol and drugs. And it's designed to meet a variety of different parenting styles. It's not a parenting class. It's just, these are some ways you can start the conversation with your kids. I think our research shows, I believe it is 1 in 5 high school students drinks. Again, as I said, that means that 4 out of 5 don't. But 1 in 5 drinks, but only 1 out of 100 parents actually believes that their kid is drinking. So we do need to reach out to parents as well to educate them. Again, despite what we see on TV or in the movies, kids report that their parents, actually close to 80% of high school students report that their parents are the leading indicator of how they make decisions. I know that I know it's definitely a stereotype that teenagers never listen to their parents. However, that seems to be that's kind of just for show, and that actually a lot of times they are listening. So we want to get that information out to parents. And then, of course, we do work to support the 21 minimum drinking age law in terms of legislative advocacy here. That was one of our earliest legislative achievements at MADD, and that law actually saves 4,700 lives each year across the country. So we know that legislation saves lives, and we continue to support and protect it. One of the areas where we cross our prevention efforts and our victim services is victim impact panels, and Jocelyn mentioned a little bit about this earlier. And our goal here with victim impact panels is to provide a personal perspective on the tragedy of drunk and drug driving to people who have gotten a DUI. So whether it's from alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs, we see a number of people at our panels, people who have gotten a DUI, and we want to educate them on, this may not have happened in your case. There may not have been a crash. There may not have been a death or injury. You need to know that there's another way things could have turned out, which could be much more tragic. And you also need to know that when you leave this room, you have a chance to make better decisions going forward. So we really want to support that action. So our victim impact panels they're not judgmental, they're not shaming. We do want to show a realistic perspective of what happens to victims of drunk and drug driving. But they're certainly not a scared straight program that actually just kind of shuts people down. We want to be able to engage with them. And in fact, this model, while it's not a one-to-one victim offender dialogue, it is based on restorative justice concept. So we give people who have committed a crime a chance to interact with victims who have experienced that crime. And so while it's not one-to-one, our attendees do have a chance to ask questions, find out more about the victim's perspective. One of the really interesting things to me when I go and see a panel afterwards, there are always people who come up to our speaker and they want to say, "I'm sorry." And it occurred to me that they haven't had a chance to say "I'm sorry" to anybody. Like, they've been carrying around all this guilt and have never been able to express it to somebody. And so in that sense, it is a very powerful restorative justice model. So it is a healing opportunity for victims. Not every victim wants to be a public speaker, and we respect that. For those who do want to do it, it can be a powerful opportunity for them. And we are trying to change participant attitudes. And when someone gets a DUI, there are a number of different countermeasures that come into effect. There's ignition interlocks, there's treatment and education. There's a lot that tells people about how to separate drinking or using drugs and driving. There's a lot there in terms of what to do going forward and how to do it. Victim impact panels are where we tell people why it's important. When you make safer choices, you're preventing this sort of tragedy and pain that victims and survivors are experiencing. You're helping to save lives. You're doing your part to make your community safer. So we really do try to drive that home with, we can't change what brought you in here. When you leave our panel, you have a chance to be a part of the solution. You have a chance to make better choices going forward, and we really want to encourage that. So we have, I've lost track of how many victim impact panel speakers we have. We have a great number of them, a variety of different experiences, and we're always looking for victims who are interested in that opportunity.
All right, so circling back around to our Walk Like MADD, as I mentioned before, we have 3 walks. One, these are important dates, so write them down. the Denver walk is August 3rd. Colorado Springs is September 7th. Greeley is September 21st. The reason they're important is because we want you to come out and walk with us. So create a team or just come out by yourself. We would love to see you there. As I said, it's a memorial event, but it's also one of our major fundraisers. So the money that is raised at our Walk Like MADD events helps us to serve victims of impaired driving. So please come out, come walk with us. Get your agency on board, your friends, your family members, and it's a really, really great event, and it's really important to our mission. So you can get more information at walklikemadd.org, and we look forward to seeing you there. So that is the end of our prepared presentation. Kirsten, have there been questions?
Okay, so if anyone's got a question, go ahead and type in the question box there or use the raise hand function. If you have something you don't feel like typing, hit the little raise hand button and I'll unmute you and we can go ahead and just ask it through our audio system here. So yeah, we'll give folks a minute to think about that. In the meantime, Jocelyn, you mentioned victims being there's re-victimization occurring at parole hearings. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means or what that can look like?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and this even goes through the process when it's still in the prosecution phase. Anytime there's a hearing or they get a letter in the mail or, it's like victims have a tendency, hopefully, to kind of go back to whatever their new normal is. They get back to their lives, kind of figuring out what that is, and then, there's a hearing or there's a letter in the mail or there's, something that comes up, and it's just like, it just brings it right back up again. So especially when they're, the case has been, it's past the sentencing phase and the offender has been serving a sentence, then that's usually a longer period of time. So then they prepare for this parole hearing, and then they start walking back through, the day that it happened, how they got the notification, the days following, the court process. It just brings it all back up again because they start thinking about one of the things that the parole board wants to hear is how has this impacted their lives. So then as they start reliving it to prepare for that hearing, that just brings up those emotions all over again. So that can be really traumatizing for victims to go through. But it's really important that if a victim wants to be at that parole hearing, that they're given that opportunity. And sometimes they don't want to be there, and that's okay. But we want to provide them that support for if they do want to be at that hearing.
That makes sense. Thank you. All right, not seeing folks with any questions. So unless anyone has a last minute one that's popped up, I want to remind folks that this we've been joined today by Jocelyn Reimer, who's the Manager of Victim Services, and Fran Lanzer, who is the State Executive Director of MADD Colorado, and that's Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Oh, good, we've got our phone number, contact info up again, that's great. If you joined us a little later, I want to remind you that if you missed part of the presentation, you can watch it on COVA's YouTube channel at any point in time that's convenient. All right, thanks everyone so much for being on board. Fran or Jocelyn, any last things that you'd like to mention?
We just want to thank everyone for everything that you all do to help save lives and support victims. We appreciate you.
Awesome. Yeah, I will plug just having attended a victim impact panel one time in a professional capacity and being actually almost unable to stop crying. It was incredibly impactful. I still remember it to this day. So would encourage, if advocates wanted to see what that looks like, if they're thinking of referring a client, can they sit in the back of a panel?
Absolutely. Yep. Reach out to us, and we have panels across the state. That's something else that I forgot to mention. We provide services all across Colorado. We have panels across Colorado. So if you're interested, let one of us know, and we can get you connected with whatever panel is closest to you.
Awesome. That's perfect. That makes sense. And actually, do you want to just run down your dates of your location of your walk one more time?
Our Denver walk is August 3rd. Colorado Springs is September 7th. And Greeley is September 21st. You're welcome to attend any or all of those.
All right. With that, we'll say goodbye and enjoy folks to have a great lunch. Thanks so much to everyone, and keep doing good work.